Welcome. This is Depot Friday night, and this is an oral history night on the ladies of northern Tioga County. We're at Valley, Berkshire, and Richford. And the purpose of this is not to really talk about ladies, but to get the ladies' perspective on what happened around here through the years. And I was sitting here trying to figure out how to organize this so that we get it kind of in a line, a timeline. And I had talked to people on the phone. I thought possibly we would have World War I people, and before I don't see any out there. So I don't think we can go back that. Let's start with the Depression, unless you have another idea. Who was there? What were you doing? Well, I can remember my parents telling stories of the Depression, and I have a mother-in-law that, you know, to this day saves all kinds of things. I'm sure that's the reason. I think that people that lived through the Depression are different from people that did not live through the Depression, and it's difficult for us to understand the amount of how thrifty you had to be, and how your life changed from being okay to being simply, swept off your. I think it's important that people today understand what it was like for you. How about you start?
I've not met a woman, so I can speak for the Depression. I'm Freddie Franks. Well, I'm not from around here, but in the country it was about the same wherever you went during the Depression. Now, I lived on a farm, and as far as I could ever see, the farmer was hit last, really. When the Depression first started, they were selling their milk and all their goods to we went to New York City, and in New York City there were low lines. But at the farm, there seemed to always be work for people within the country. Well, a lot of times they cut wood or things like that just to have heat. And if they cut it on hands for the farmer or whoever wanted the fields cleared, and they would sell half of theirs because they worked hard to maybe get more than they needed for themselves and sell it, and they had that. And the farmer, as a rule, never worried about some feed because he always go out and feed. He had chickens, he had killed his own beef, raised his own pork, and all that. He didn't have to worry that much. He always had some feed, and he raised the vegetables and so forth, put them in the vegetable cellar, and he kept them. And many a time, a person in the fall of the year would want to help you harvest a lot of that stuff, so they would maybe, instead of pay, they would take maybe a bushel of potatoes or this and that. And a lot of farmers depended on that, and that's one way they got a lot of work done.
What did your mom do to take care of you? You were a kid, right?
Well, I was in my teens.
You were in your teens. Okay. So,
my mother, she helped around the farm, so we didn't have to hire help. She canned everything that she could can and some besides. So you always had plenty to eat. And she'd make your gloves out of old flour bags, believe it or not. And the clothes that you wore, sometimes they were almost new because they had that many patches on them. Just because, so they wouldn't have to buy, but they always kept good clothes for school and so forth. But whereas on the farm, you might have a new pants and clothes was already patches.
My mother says that people did a lot to try to keep their spirits up. Yeah. And one of the things they would do to be festive was to go on picnics. Because, of course, eating outside was more, going someplace, walking down the road somehow was better than staying home and eating their Depression food. So how about if we go that route? How did you keep your spirits up? Or were your spirits down? Or as kids, did you even?
I agree with Fred that we were relatively, as smart families in the Northeast, we were whole garden, and your mother canned everything under the sun from the garden, plus elderberries and gooseberries and everything from the field. The whole wild, right?
The farms that were going to fail had already failed before our recollection begins. That
Yeah.
a lot of the land had gone to the state, but it was before our time. I think you read that a lot of the land had gone to the state just before our era, in the 20s,
Just before,
the early
you think
20s.
it's 28, 29, a lot of land in our section was bought up by the state to the farmers that were going out of business.
We never recollect hard times.
Well, I
Because we
certainly
always had
recollect
rules
hard
and laws,
times.
and
Were you here to
wood for the funner.
this is Pat Liddy.
I was a small child, but I can remember we had no money for anything. And I can remember my mother searching the house, trying to find 3 pennies to mail a letter to her mother.
Oh, my.
So I really remember hard times.
And you were here. You were in
Us
this
here
area.
in Center.
Were your parents farmers? Were you farmers?
Yes.
But
Still
They-
cash money was.
cash money was unheard of, right?
Right.
Yes. You were from what, Delaware County or Alton?
Yes.
Delaware.
And you go to the grocery store to buy flour or sugar and stuff, you hope your hands are been busy because you would borrow.
Spot your eggs or something,
Borrow.
flour or coffee, you know.
Borrow for that. And another thing the women, after you said it was that a lot of the farmers' wives would get together in the afternoon or evenings and have quilting bees and things like that. In other words, they would take old stuff that was wore out and they would patch up, make patchwork quilts, and find when you pick the duck or a chicken, you find we'll call the fine feathers, and you had
For your pillows.
for your pillows and so forth.
And tips.
The only thing I throw away of a chicken was the cluck, and the roosters, the turkeys was the gobble.
The problem with the Depression was that you didn't have a concept of when it would end or if it would end. If somebody said, you're going to have a depression for 3 years, you'd go, okay, I'll have a depression for 3 years. But when suddenly everything fails and you don't know that there's a bottom to it, you don't know if you've hit the bottom, and you don't know how long it's going to be, and you have these babies, to take care of, that's very scary. Do you think, we're talking about the ladies, maybe we'll talk about men some other day, but we're talking about ladies. Do you think Mom was depressed? Was she, rallying to the cause? What was happening?
I don't think she had time to be depressed.
She was just working her brains out, trying to survive it.
Figuring out how to survive it.
So she may have gone from, a life of control to suddenly the survival mode, every day, a fight.
I don't think they ever was that well off before that they realized that it was such a big depression. It's just something that came along and you handled it.
So it
Same
was
way
more
with our
matter.
feed used to come in printed bags, and our mothers used to take the bags to make our clothes with them.
Yeah, my mother describes it a dramatic,
Change for her.
change.
Were
But
they
maybe not on
farmers?
a farm.
Your-
She wasn't on a
She was
farm.
not, that's probably why.
That's probably
Right.
why. All of a sudden, no paycheck, no whatever. It's dramatic.
I was born on the farm, I grew up on the farm. My father was a deep sea fisherman. Now, I don't remember, I was not affected at all by the Depression. But my sister, who was 4 years older, was. She remembers taking cardboard and putting in the shoe to cover up the hole in the bottom of the shoes. And I don't remember any of this. And when she got a job, she says, I'm going to have shoes. And to this day, shoes are very important to her.
I grew up in West End, and not very far from the DJ that time. And I do remember the soup line, going for soup. And I remember in kindergarten or first grade, getting milk. We weren't farmers, but we had chickens in the backyard and the garden. When you were in town,
spirit of pulling together or a spirit of dog eat dog?
Oh, pulling together
I figured it might, I figured it might be working just that way.
in the war, reinforce that.
You think on the farm, one farmer might have had an engine or a tractor. Another farmer might have a blower for cutting corn. Another one might have a buzz saw. And 5 or 6 farmers would go right around the circle and use all the machinery, the pieces of machinery that was had. And that's how they used to cut wood and harvest stuff,
Helping each
trash and all that. They would go right around in a circle and they worked together. Of course,
And threshing time. Not every farmer would have all the threshing machines, right? But they would all help.
maybe one farmer would have a threshing machine, another have a tractor or a power to run that.
Yeah,
and then
whatever.
A binder and things like that.
Yeah.
The 4 or 5 farmers all have,
Until the crop was all in, they'd all get together at
Yeah.
different farms till it was done. And the housewife and any daughters that were around or other housewives, they put on a feast like you wouldn't believe at even threshing time. At least 3 different meats, you know.
you never starve.
Great.
And then,
I'm going to focus the group here again. This is the ladies of Northern Tioga County. Throughout history, no, I'm not chastising you guys. We're going to get stuck on the Depression, and we're not going to get to the present unless we sort of move along to the next phase, which, according to my calculations, would be the 40s, World War II. And you were older then, very chic in your, World War II outfits. And what was that like? Again, I interviewed my mother, as you can tell, and she said, as far as she was concerned, it was the most pulling together, spirited time of her whole life. And I said, good God, it was a war. How could that have been fun? And she said, yes, it was awful. Yes, she lost a brother. It was horrible. But in spite of the horror, there was a certain patriotism. She described it as even I can't even come up with the word, but there was a a what? Yes. Yes, indeed. That's exactly what it was, according to her. You seem to be nodding and saying yes. Here in Newark Valley, there was the same kind of
They were my high school years.
high school years. This is Dorothy Torrey. What did you do in high school? What did high school students do during World War II?
I'm trying to think.
Trying to think. Yeah, kids are still trying to think.
I think elementary school kids sold seeds.
Oh, war bonds.
Or victory gardens.
Yeah, for
Victory
victory
garden.
For 10-cent stamp, and then you put it in the book, and
Yep.
say the book was filled, and then you get a bond.
Were we taking old white sheets and making bandages, maybe?
Yeah.
Or were we
Rolling.
rolling and shipping them
Get
out?
together in
And
the municipal building.
ladies, if you could knit or crochet, you were making mittens and I don't know what all, right? Or those who needed them. I don't know if the soldiers are wearing them. Swaps or not. Oh, civilian air defense. That's
Yeah,
what they
civil,
were.
yeah.
My father was chief for Newark Valley, in Newark Valley for many years. And I used to watch, there used to be a little building on top of the present middle school, which used to be the central school. And like for 4-hour shifts, was it? 4 or 5 hour shifts. Being all alone, 2 kids, in high school, going up there in the roof and looking for airplanes and enemy planes and reporting them if you saw something that you couldn't identify, sort of thing.
Any close calls out here in the middle of nowhere?
I don't think you'd locked your doors back in the 40s at the house, really.
And what did you do when your friends, you found out that your friends were dead? I'm sure you just came back and all the Coolidge boys came back. But people from here did not come back, right? There's got to be somebody here that
There are
didn't.
some that did not come back. Bob
Somebody
Lawrence. Most of them
what
came
the
back.
kids did during World War II. I was on the ship that the high school kids of New York, the state of New York, and the state of Vermont raised enough bonds to build the aircraft carrier, the Lake Champlain, which was never seen sea duty, never seen fighting duty, but it was built and commissioned in 1945 in May. And that's what the kids of the sold bonds and built that ship from Vermont in New York.
Well, one of the things that happened was when women got liberated and were able to go to work.
That's right.
Yeah, we had to go to the defense plants because the men were in war.
And did that happen even here in northern Tioga County? Oh, yes.
And where did y'all, Johnson City was looking at a defense plant, the West General Electric, which is now Lockheed Martin. It was Remington.
IBM.
Remington, Reagan back then.
IBM.
Made Northern Bomb Sight, for one thing.
Hired women.
Rifles.
How many of you actually went off to work for your first time in your life?
During the
And you
Second
weren't-
World War.
And were you not, prior to the war, were you not planning to go off to work? Was this a new?
You were going to England.
Went to business school. I worked a year, but then I went to Sydney because it's been going work in Warpath.
War factory at Sydney.
Made airplane parts.
I'd forgotten you did
Were you,
that.
were you proud?
Well, I don't know, I never thought about it.
Just thought it was your duty and you
Yeah,
needed the
I had to
income
do
and.
it, yeah. Something had to be done.
Let's go back to Mom. Poor Mom had got through the Depression, raised the kids, raised the boys, and then had to say, even though it was a spirited war and one that people were behind, they had to say, go take them. Women don't like that. I don't think ladies like to raise up little boys and go to war, no matter how worthy.
They know that it's necessary evil, I guess you might say.
How did they act? Accepting? Bummed? Mad?
Accepting.
Public.
Accepting.
In public.
In public.
I know my mother, when I went, she didn't want me to go, but there was nothing to hold me. You know, when I was on the farm, there was too many of us on the farm, and if there was a father and one son could stay on the farm, but I went, and I know she didn't, but yet holding back my brother from going into service, she thought she wasn't doing anything for the country because he was home on the farm working.
If it wasn't for the war, Freddie and I probably never would have met.
There you go, and your kids would never have been born, and
What I got?
look what you got.
He was a shipmate with my cousin, and my cousin brought him home for a visit.
Did anybody get married before, somebody got shut out?
During on leave.
Or during on leave, or anything like that?
I was married in 35. That was before the war.
My husband was called, but we bought this farm and we were struggling to get that going and everything. And I wound up in the hospital with appendicitis and I wasn't able to, farm it. And we had 4 children.
Could you introduce yourself for the
Yeah, Anita Thomas.
World
So
War?
he didn't have to go, but he worked in the defense.
Which defense plant did he work in?
And then GE.
GE in Westover or Johnson City, they call it.
And he'd come home and milk the cows.
World War II, or shall we jump to I figured I'd put the 50s and the 60s together. Or do you want to do the 50s and the 60s separate?
Separate worlds.
Separate? Let's do the 50s. 50s were
The quiet generation. The quiet generation, they call this, I think, the silent ones, is that right?
Things were fairly
College.
peaceful.
College that first year. You had the atomic bomb hanging over your head. People really don't think about today, I don't think, but it was a real threat. I think it affected people our age.
That was new. The atomic bomb, of course, was something that really shaped history. All of a sudden, we had something so big, and reports of it melting the concrete, turning human beings into puddles, and things like that. And before that, war was a little more personal, I guess. And yeah, when that happened, you realized that you were a thread away from whatever. You're depending on the judgment of whoever to not push the button or push the button, and that's a tenuous position. Certainly a change with attitude.
I think prosperity seemed to have come along with the Second World War and the people coming back. The soldiers needed new cars, and homes and all this right after the war, which was over in 45, of course. And so everything was just booming ahead in the 50s, wasn't it? Television came in the 50s.
Well, I can remember when my first child was born, I had a full-time job, and it wasn't even considered that I'd keep the job. I just automatically thought, well, I guess my working life is over. I guess I better stay home. And I think that was the 50s, mid-50s, and by the time I just kept going on like that. But that didn't change until the 60s, probably.
It was the days before rampant divorce.
Yeah.
That was pre-rampant divorce. So you stayed with your kids and stayed with your family, stayed with the boat, stayed with the sinking boat, and stayed with the, whatever.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
Days before rampant anything.
Rampant anything. That's right. A lot of rampages happened in the 60s. The 60s were the rampages.
Talking about those we lost in the Korean War.
Yeah, okay. Who did who?
I don't know, a Briggs fellow from East Newark, over 38B, lost his life. Was it me? And there was someone else. That was kind of fuzzy in our minds. The Second World War, you had a real purpose and you knew all about it, sort of thing. But the Korean, I think, was fuzzy, almost like the Vietnam.
In the 50s, did most people have TVs? Some people have TVs out here?
That's when TV,
That's one of the most of them.
in the 50s, that's when TVs
Most
grew
people,
up
most
strong.
people were having TVs
End of the 50s.
by the end of the 50s.
What was your reception like in your first TV?
I was an admiral from
Generally, the reception wasn't very good in the valley,
well, it's just Channel 12. There was just one channel. Of course, they were all kinescope recordings. It was pretty bad, except for the local shows.
Well, we lived up on top of King Hill, so we could get, we had a pipe up to the antenna was up on the roof, and we would go out with a pipe wrench and we could turn it to Syracuse. We could get 3 and 5, and then we'd turn it back towards Binghamton and get channel 12. That was the original rotor,
Oh, it was a pipe wrench.
What
So
year
we
was
got-
that, Bob?
We got the 3 networks then.
Like
ABC,
59,
NBC, and CBS.
My mother's uncle tied the TV antenna to the bed springs and got all of them. That's no joke, he did. Got the best reception of anybody in town was tied to the bed springs.
So were you thinking, you mothers, were you thinking, oh, this is corrupting my child's mind? Right. Or did you think it was just wonderful? What's that?
They had
Good, clean TV.
more family stuff.
Nobody wants to watch. Does anybody have any good story of their first view of TV? That's a first. that's like a boing first to, you know, obviously you've heard of it and then, I don't know, ran out someplace to see it.
Gosh, I was babysitting, and it's strange to see because it was so snowy, you hardly see it. Couldn't take my eyes off it.
Was it a 5-inch screen?
No, I think it was a little bigger than that.
No one has mentioned going to the middle school, which was a central school here on Wake Street, Saturday nights to see the movies for 10 cents, wasn't it? All during, was it the war or just prior to the war? Second World War.
After the war, it was a quarter.
Oh, after Second World War, it was a quarter. But I remember we couldn't have a car. I don't know whether it's because of the war effort or the gas was rationed. But we lived a mile and a half north of the middle school here, and my father would put the smallest kids on a cart and pull it down, and the rest of us would walk. And of course, it wasn't blacktop roads; it was nice pounded down dirt, road, which was easy to walk on. But we didn't mind that mile and a half down, just as long as we could see that movie in the auditorium in the middle school for a dime each.
That's good. Now, I was wondering, if you were out in the country, if you were a little behind or slower drug-wise. The 60s is the famous psychedelic era. Did you get that in the 60s here, or did you wait till the 70s, or?
We might have read about it.
You read about
During the 60s in the village here, there were a number of businesses still operating that exist today. There was Calkins Variety Store. You could get almost anything that you needed. They sold everything from yarn to buttons to fabric.
Like sold TVs and actually.
Yeah.
That's where
I really missed
our
Calvin's
TV
Variety
book,
Store. It's where the liquor store is now by the bridge.
And there were 2 grocery stores on Wick Street, counting Robert's store and Red and White.
Well, Mrs. Light makes 30.
Right. Mrs. Life was
It was Woods Grocery,
on Main Street, a meat farm.
Alan Beck's on Water Street, A&P on Water Street.
That was during the 40s.
Always had a jewelry and watch store in the village.
So the ladies of Newark Valley were shopping locally.
Yes.
That's right.
Right. And Berkshire and Richford the same? Did they
And they had
have?
stores too.
They had stores too, in the 60s, late as the 60s.
What else was going on in the 60s? You had
Woodbury Gate was rebuilt in, was it 61? And the Beaver Billings house looks like it's down a bank now, but the road used to be level with the garden and house.
We had those 3 assassinations that ladies do not like. I didn't either, but ladies really do not like, to have any assassinations. And, I think that when, that there was, World War II, that was sort of up, maybe it sort of was the 50s, which were, we say relatively gentle despite the Cold War. People were gentle. The 60s, all of a sudden, all that happened, and it seems like the world's been in a bit of a bad mood ever since. It was like these people were, despite your politics, they were of heroic status, and bang, 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 they were gone. And I'm not sure that we've got the zing that those times had, the 40s, 50s, 60s. I don't know, maybe. I couldn't judge because I was just a kid and I don't know.
What's the word?
We lost our national self-confidence.
Yeah, something like this.
Our assurance that we knew where we were going and that we were the greatest. John Kennedy's assassination, to me, was the
Turning
breaking
point.
point. Turning point.
Everybody remembers.
Kids when adults are really thrown.
Oh, no.
When you see adults really, really thrown, it scares the wits out of little kids. I think
this is another story, but I think that's sort of what's wrong with a lot of them today. But I can remember looking from adult to adult to adult, and they were thrown. They were decimated, you know. And the looks on their faces, I can still picture.
Everybody that's old enough can remember exactly what they were doing that day when Kennedy was assassinated.
And that would make a nice oral history night, or an oral history presentation to go around interviewing people.
Most people don't know this, but I'm from Whittier, California, hometown.
Of Richard Nixon. And so, you know, when he became president, he was almost like a relative becoming president. You know, we had grown up with Nixon lore, and Nixon here and Nixon's face and Nixon this. You know, we lived very close to where he went to college, where he had his first law practice, where his brother, you know, is, you know, it's kind of weird to like have your own president, you know. And to me, Nixon would be it. I'm not saying I like him or dislike him, but he was a very familiar character and an interesting president. And then on top of the Cold War, John F. Kennedy, da-da-da. Then there's Watergate.
I think I probably thought it was far removed. I was really more concerned with bringing up my family and more immediate concerns locally. I mean, I was horrified at the whole thing, but still I was more detached, you know. I had more pressing things to do, to me anyway.
How about your kids? Did they look like somebody you didn't want to know, or?
The surprising thing, I think, is we were living in the latter half of the 60s. We were living in Connecticut and the greater metropolitan suburban area. We could still, when Lee was 14 years old, we were living in Connecticut. That would have been 1970. Things were still safe enough that we could let him take and he did this, a group of neighborhood boys, get on the commuter train and go to New York City, he being the oldest one, take them to a ski equipment show in one of the convention centers in New York City, on his own. In 1970, things were still.
Wow.
Another example, I recall, is about the same year, Sue Ellen went to, our daughter, our oldest daughter, went to the New York Public Library to do some research for a high school paper. Left her grandmother's ring on the wash basin in the ladies' room. Didn't realize it until she got home. Called the New York Public Library, and they had it in Lost and Found.
Whoa.
It was two rubies. It's like ancient history, I think.
It's hard to imagine doing that. I wonder if you still could. I mean, you think you can, but I wonder if it could actually would come back.
Do Vietnam.
Oh, we didn't do Vietnam. That's right. Let's do Vietnam. Okay, Vietnam was on top of the Cold War, on top of the 3 assassinations, before Watergate, and it was in between. Was sort of hovering between the 3 assassinations and then later the coup de grace, Watergate. What about Vietnam? You had kids go? Did anybody have kids go? Not old enough?
It was a very divisive time.
Very divisive time. Congress had not declared war, so you understood why people went to Canada to get out of it. It was a peace thing, wasn't it? What? It was a peace thing, wasn't it? It wasn't war.
It was Civil War.
Big love, not war or something.
Vietnam was actually the Civil War. Two sections of the country wanted to be alone with one another, same way as Korea. Two separate sections of the country wanted to rule one another. And France was kicked out of Vietnam, and that's when the fight started.
I can think of 2 boys in their valley that were killed. Württemberg boy died the next night, and Zimmer boy was killed.
There was a Zimmer from Maine that was killed too.
All right, it's about 10 after 8. We're going into the present, which since it's now, it might be a little harder to talk about, but I thought since you're being filmed, you know, heaven knows who's going to see this and when and where. And I thought at this point, maybe we would, the ladies of Northern Tioga County would send a message, you know, based on all this, you know, all this past about, you know, what's going on or what should be going on. You've got the Depression, you know, lessons learned, World War II, lessons learned. You know, a big change here in attitude from World War I to Vietnam. Lessons learned, lessons learned. What do you want to say to the to whoever is going to see this?
I think we should learn from our mistakes, and education is one of our would be the best way. The more we study history, the more we can learn from it.
Would you say that history that we're studying needs to be like real?
Yes.
You know, tangible, human.
I remember when we were first married in 52, Ray's grandfather was like 89, and he'd been through the Depression and then lost his farm, and he was very, just felt like it was after World War II, and the whole world was going to hell in a handbasket, and he just, if he were alive today, he'd certainly be very pleased with many changes after World War II. I mean, the computer, we never dreamed that we would be so advanced technology-wise. And so perhaps in the future, our kids are learning from some of our mistakes, and we'll go forward.
I guess this is the end. The ladies of Northern Tioga County.